Hello folks, welcome to Outdoors with Bud. I'm your host, Bud Fields. Before we get started, my wife Diane and I would like to congratulate Curtis Bowman and his lovely wife Madeline. They've got two beautiful little girls, and the first part of October, God blessed them with twins. They got another little girl and a little boy. So Madeline, Curtis, congratulations. Okay, now let's get back to the business. I've had a number of people contact me wanting to know what's a good way to fix venison, and I'll admit I am not a cook. I am a microwave gourmet. I mean, I can push button number 1 and button number 2 and cook, and that's it. So my guest today is my wife of almost 61 years, and I think she deserves a medal and an Oscar for all that. And she's going to kind of share with us some of the ways she can fix something basic and simple. For one thing, I don't need a lot of the fancy marinating and rubs and everything on mine. I mean, she can fix it basically and stick it in front of me, and that's good enough for me. So, Dinah, I want to welcome you to the program. And this is all unrehearsed.
Exactly.
So she's going to kind of give you some ideas of what you can do with the venison. And so I'm going to turn the program over to her, and I've got a few things wrote down here that I'm going to interject on it and see how it works out. So go right ahead.
Okay, well, I don't have a lot of recipes because Bud likes his venison just venison. He doesn't like anything put on. I do put rubs on it occasionally just to make it different, and you can use any rub you want for like on a steak. I think his very favorite thing is the stew meat. And I can show you here, I use McCormick's beef stew and basically follow the directions. And I just brown the cube deer, and then I put it in the crock pot, and I think it calls for 3 cups of water. And then I let that cook on high for probably 3 or 4 hours. And then I add carrots, because carrots take a little bit longer to cook than the potatoes. So I put the carrots in first, and maybe an hour or so later I will put the potatoes in, and then occasionally we put in peas, and you could add celery or anything that you like, onions, anything you like in your stew, and it has a really good flavor, and the meat will just fall apart. So he does like that. That's his favorite.
And I like to have that over. Now you can do that. You can put it over white rice, which I like, or you can, and if you want to use noodles, you can put it over noodles.
In mine, I just like it in a bowl with a piece of bread and butter. So.
And I'm not much for leftovers, but that is something that I could eat 4 or 5 times a week if it lasts that long. Just stick it in the microwave to warm it up, and trust me, when you're in the other end of the house, you can smell this cooking, and you're ready to eat right now. Yeah. And it's really fantastic.
And then for anybody else who's starting out, I would suggest using the ground deer and using it just like you would ground beef. Like you can put it in chili, you can put it in spaghetti, anything that calls for ground beef, use the ground deer, and that kind of gets you used to the taste of the deer. And with the other seasonings, you really can't tell the difference, I don't think, if they've taken good care of their deer. Now, when Bud first started hunting, he was hunting in Michigan, and the deer ate a lot of browse, and it was terrible. I could not even hardly stand to cook it because it had a real gamey smell. But the deer he gets here locally actually eat beans and corn, and they taste a lot like beef. It's doesn't have that real strong wild gamey taste to it. But I will take his favorite, of course, is the tenderloin, and I can just put it on the grill, and he loves it that way. Now, I do sometimes put it in butter and slowly cook it in a little saute pan of butter, and that makes it taste a little different, I think.
Right.
And then the other steaks, like I said, he just likes, put some A1 on it, and he's happy. So I would say start out with your ground beef, or your ground deer, because that is, you add other things to it and gets you used to eating deer, because some people just have a think, oh dear, I don't know that I'm going to like that. So I think if you start out, season it just like you would any other, you'll find that it is really good. Because I'm not one on game.
Right.
I do like this is good. And then if you happen to harvest a deer that is maybe older and maybe a little bit tougher, I use the sous vide which I can show you. This is what a sous vide is. And you actually have to just put it in I use this pan, and you put so much water in it, and your meat actually goes into a bag. And then you put your roast or your steaks or whatever you want, and you can set the timer. It comes with instructions. And then literally what you do, it'll tell you how long to keep it in for rare, medium, or well done. And then you, like I said, you just set this and it go off, but your meat will look funny because it's actually been the heat of the water that's cooking it. So after you take it out, then I like to put it on the grill for just a few minutes, like to brown it up a little bit. But that really makes it really tender.
We went to Colorado. Our granddaughter had a wedding out there, and we drove out because I don't fly. But they had a meal for us out there, and they had pronghorn antelope and elk. And they asked me which did I want. I thought, well, by golly, I'm going to try both of them because those are hard to get here in Indiana. You don't get very many of them.
Well, that was the first time I'd heard of the sous vide because she uses a sous vide, and she does marinate her meat like overnight, maybe in buttermilk, because like I said, she's got different game. And so they all ended up tasting basically the same, and it was so tender put in the sous vide that we just cut it with a fork, and they were big 3-inch square pieces of meat, and it was so good. So that's another thing that you can do to make it really good and tender. But like I said, when it comes out of that bag, it looks anemic because it's just been heated with water. And then you just like throw it on the grill and brown it up for a couple seconds and you're done. So I can't think of anything else other than, is there anything else that you like?
You can, if you like meatloaf, you cannot beat venison as meatloaf.
Well, that's the ground beef, ground again. Like I said, you just make it just like you would your beef.
It's great for making chili, if you want to put it in tacos. I suppose you could even add it to pizza if you wanted to, instead of using regular sausage. But I've never had to have it fancily marinated. I mean, she can put it on the grill outside and fix it, or she can put it in a George Foreman grill, and we've used that a heck of a lot. I don't know how many of those we went through over the years.
Yeah.
But really, she was talking about the different types of taste. Well, I'd done a podcast before about why the deer taste different in Michigan or Wisconsin compared to Indiana. Where we was hunting in Michigan, it's all sand. There's hardly any crops up in that particular area. Now there are some areas they can get corn to grow, but nothing like what you see here. And those deer are feeding on browse. I mean, they're eating acorns, different parts of the shrubs that they find up there. And we've hunted up there the last part of December in the snow, and the only thing that the deer was eating was bark on a tree. And I don't see where that could be very nutritious. But that deer will have a different taste, be much stronger than what our Indiana deer are. But like if you see a farmer, maybe he's got some cattle that's over here in this pasture feeding on, let's say, grass. Then he's got some pinned up over here that they're feeding on crops. I mean, they're feeding on soybeans, alfalfa, corn, and all that. That meat is going to taste much better than what the ones that's eating the browse. But I can't say that I've really shot any bad deer, but I do admit that the deer that we were getting, like in Wisconsin, Minnesota, places like that, it does have a little bit different taste, and it's got a different smell. But I've had people tell me before I retired, they knew I liked to eat venison. My wife made a meatloaf, and we had some left over. I took it into work, and there was a draw furnace right close to where I was working. I set that foil on this draw furnace. And when we went up to the break table, we were playing euchre. And I had this meatloaf open beside me, and this guy's sitting there like this watching me play cards or trying to play. And he was smelling that meatloaf. Now, this guy had made the comment numerous times, I do not like deer. I absolutely refuse to eat deer. Well, he had made that comment so many times, everybody at that table knew, and they knew what I was eating. Well, this guy says, boy, that meatloaf smells good. He said, I think I'm going to get a piece of it. He reached over and he got that, and everybody just smiled. They didn't say nothing. He took a bite out of that, and he said, I think I should have married your wife. He said, that meatloaf's pretty good. He sat there and probably ate a third of that. And then one of the guys at the table commented, he said, I thought you said you didn't like venison. He said, I can't stand it. Well, he went through about a third of that meatloaf that I took in there. Then he looked at me, and I don't know whether he was mad at me for not telling him, or he didn't know whether he's going to get sick, but he did say, that's not bad at all. But a lot of people do that, and when I had a retirement party, we had people come in, you know, for the meal and everything. One table we had different things over here, and this other table I even had a sign up. This is all venison. We had different types of venison, and I think the venison played pretty good on everybody's part.
Pretty well gone, so they must have liked it. They would at least want to try it.
But another way too to make your venison taste good, a lot of it is, well, like I said, the diet the deer has been feeding on. A crop-fed deer is going to taste and smell much better when you do it. And also how well that deer was taken care of after it was harvested. Now, that sounds funny. How are you going to take care of a deer after you shoot it? Decomposition, composition and spoilage starts the instant the animal is shot. I mean, it's going to run away and not run too far, hopefully, and it's going to fall over. But what you got to do, you got to get that animal field dressed. What that means is, and it sounds a little gory, and it's not the most fun thing to do, you got to remove the insides of that deer. And I won't go into a lot of detail on how to do that. But one of the things that spoils the quickest on a deer is the windpipe. Of course, the windpipe, you know, goes all the way up to the throat. When you field dress the deer, you have to actually reach up in there, and the windpipe feels just like the ribbed hose on a vacuum sweeper. That's exactly what it feels like, and you can kind of pull it down. What you have to do before you remove all of the insides is pull that windpipe down, reach up in there with your knife as far as you can, and cut that windpipe, because within 10 minutes of that deer laying there, especially in the early part of the October hunting season when it's warm, that's going to spoil and you're going to lose a lot of your meat. So the quicker you can get that deer field dressed, get it to air out. I will usually spread the rib cage open with a stick or a branch or something to keep it up where it can air out. And then I take it to the processor as soon as possible. A lot of guys well, I should say everybody that shoots a deer is proud. They want to show it to their buddies. What I like to do is take my pictures right then and there. And then that way I know that I've got good pictures of the animal. Now I clean it up to where it's not a bloody mess, and then I take it right to the processor. Now we're lucky, about a mile from where we deer hunt, there's a processor right there. And when I take that deer up there, only thing I do, I sign these papers. They ask me, how do you want it processed? I tell them that. 3 or 4 days later, they call me back, and I go up there, and my deer's all processed the way I want it. It's all labeled and marked. And that's better, because a lot of guys years ago, when they killed their animal, they would transport it on the hood of their car or the hood of their truck. You don't want to do that, because the heat of that engine coming up is going to add to the spoilage of that meat. So the best thing to do is get your pictures taken, get it processed as soon as possible. A lot of the old timers used to let them hang outside for 3 or 4 weeks. I wouldn't recommend that. The flies are going to get on it, and it's going to start ruining the meat, and you're going to lose out a lot of it. But if you want any more suggestions on recipes, there's a bunch of information on the internet. Just type on your search engine recipes for preparing venison. But when we first got married, Dinah would not eat any meat at all, because her dad was a deer hunter. The deer that they were shooting out west, they were all, they was feeding on sage and all that kind of stuff, and it was not as good as the Indiana deer up here. But you get a deer, you take care of it, and it's going to make it easier on how you prepare it and how your wife serves it. But I could eat it for every meal. Now, I know a lot of people can't, but in my opinion, it's hard to beat. And even a young deer or a doe is going to taste really good. But it's up to you what deer you want to take. The younger ones are very tender, but you don't get a whole lot of meat out of it. The does are great eating. And the bucks, if it's a real old buck like the one I got this year, it only had 3 teeth, and the teeth were ground down almost even with the gums. That deer is a little bit tougher, but it still tastes good. So
Then you can use the sous vide.
Then you can use a sous vide. Well, folks, I want to thank you guys for letting us come into your homes and give you some information tonight. I want to thank my wife, and I'll make sure she gets a check in the mail, and maybe a special award for putting up with me all these years and for preparing all the meals. But don't ever let anybody tell you that venison is not good, because it is, and it's better for you because there's less fat on the deer than what there is on beef. So I'm not telling you to go out and shoot a cow now. Deer season is deer season. So thank you and good luck. God bless you.